Hello, welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White. I'm the founder of the Bobby White Foundation, and I'm here with my co-host.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Bonnie Snyder.
And we have a special guest.
We do have a special guest in. So you see, guys, we are not at the table by ourselves. Today, we are thrilled to have our guest in the studio. And we'll get to introductions and, fasten your seatbelt, guys. This is going to be an extremely fascinating conversation, but we'll get to that. In the meantime, as always, when we start the show, we like to thank Rob and John here at WeBeam TV, for giving us the opportunity to, giving us this platform. We could not do this without them. We also want to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in with us every week. And, Tammy, what about our fundraisers and, the foundation?
Things are really going to start winding up here really fast, especially there's going to be some really cool changes with the studio. So, and if you want to, help support us, there are so many ways to support us. Our kindest website where you can donate any dollar amounts, anywhere from $5 or however, there's even a spot you can choose your amount. So that's one way. We do have an auction on the foundation Facebook page. And I forgot to bring the painting today, but in a way I'm glad I didn't because I don't know where we put it. The acrylic painting that was donated by Carol Smith. You can bid on it in the comment section of that post, and I'll refresh the post so it'll come up closer to the top, so you don't have to search for it. And then there's also our t-shirts too that are available. And I just last night sent Gulfside Custom T-shirts, who are the ones that are doing the work for us, the second design. So we're going to have you'll have a choice, or you can get both.
I see me. I'll have both. I'm a t-shirt collector.
You
don't have enough t-shirts, right?
Yeah,
So.
Me too. So, and again, Father's Day is coming up, and if you are gonna purchase anything from Amazon, I'm sure you still have time to get something before that day comes. Be sure to go to smile.amazon.com and choose the Bobby White Foundation as your charity of choice. And you can do that any time of year, all year long.
If it doesn't come in for Father's Day, you order it and show Dad the receipt.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, I got you, Dad.
You just extend Father's Day a little longer is what it is. So those are, some of the multitudes of ways that you can help support us and support our station. We may end up having a streamed fundraiser coming up maybe next month. That's going to be exciting that we're working on. There's just a lot of exciting things going on.
Ooh, this has been a week.
Yeah, it's been a week for you.
It has. Before we get to our guest, and again, dynamic, yesterday was Patrick's birthday.
Yes.
And I took the day off. And, I look forward, when we talk about, anniversaries and, those milestone days, in lives, especially when we're talking about, grief and loss and things like that. And, I'd made it a point, I do not work on June 16th. It just doesn't happen. Or, I tell myself I will never work on June 16th. But then I have to pull myself back. It's like, would it be a never? But the day in itself was, it started out really emotional. My daughter is moving into a new house, but, she's in my house. Her and her children are in my house as we're doing this transition. And she walked into my room early yesterday morning, and, she sat on my bed, head went on my chest. I'm thinking I'm holding my 5-year-old daughter again. Mm-hmm. She'll be 30. I always get her and Patrick's ages mixed up. She'll be 37 in December. And, it's just like the tears just started flooding. And then we called Carl, my oldest, and, he's on the phone with us, and we're all like, oh my God, he should be here. But later on in the evening, we did a balloon launch. I went into a store and I was like, give me there's the balloons, my ceiling of my room, it's like I walked in the store, I want every balloon that you have that's birthday. And, it was kind of put off because they had a bunch of girl balloons, but no boy,
No boy
balloons. And I was like, sons, we have, it's like, come on guys, there's sons too. But anyway, needless to say, we went outside and we sang happy birthday, and there we are, me, my daughter, and the grandkids. We launched off the balloons last night.
It was really cool. I watched it. We did a Facebook Live.
Because I did do it live,
Yeah,
yes,
you
it
did the
was
Facebook
nice,
Live. And
so-
so that was neat because then it was like, oh, I get to see this now too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, no,
So
we
that was,
loved it.
yeah,
We
that
loved
was
it.
cool.
So, without further ado, let us introduce this awesome gentleman, that is, sitting to this is my right. This is like my military right. But let's introduce this, awesome gentleman sitting in to my right, and I have his bio right here, so I'm going to read because I don't want to mix anything up. But we have in our studio today Mr. Rod Cunningham. So here's Rod's introduction, and it speaks volumes. But anyway, Rod Cunningham was born to a 15-year-old mother, struggled with the death of his biological father, and watched his stepfather emotionally and physically abuse his mother in the housing projects of Jacksonville, Florida. Rod would later join the Air Force, representing a turning point in his life. He counseled and mentored over 9,000 airmen in his last 4 years of active duty. Excuse me. He eventually retired after 29 years of service at the rank of Chief Master Sergeant, the top 1% of enlisted corps. Since retirement, Rod has developed programs for Pinellas County Urban League, the DEA, school districts in Pinellas, Manatee, Pasco, and Hillsborough counties that inspire emotional wellness and sustainable drug-free living by addressing the root causes of substance use, as well as teaching coping skills and building self-esteem. Additionally, he represented the Florida Coalition of Urban Leagues in Tallahassee, working closely with state legislators. Rod is masterful at speaking to the 13-year-old in each of us. He is married to Valerie Nicole. They have 3 children and 10 grandchildren. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to present to you the number 1 emotional wellness expert, Rod Cunningham. So, Rod, welcome to the show. And I remember when you and I first met, and we were talking military experience, and you told me you were Air Force, and I was like, okay, I won't hold that against you. A joke between us military folks. As you guys know, I'm Army. But where the bio, I think it hits on a lot of points, but in some cases it doesn't give a whole lot of justice to actually being in a room and listening to you speak. So I think when I feel, I know when we're talking about a person who is number 1 in speaking about the topics that Rod's going to talk to us about. Number 1 doesn't give it justice. I mean, you are that guy. So welcome, and thank you for joining us in studio.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So, I'm looking at, your books, Climb and Climb 2. If you would, Rod, could you speak to our audience and, talk to them, what is Climb 2, and how did you get into doing what you're doing now?
Well, I'll tell you, and thank you both for having me on the show. Thank you so much. At 46 years old, I lost my mother, and I was an only child, so that was pretty hard for me. And at the time, I was a Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force, stationed in Biloxi, Mississippi. And when I lost my mom, I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to go to work. I started playing video games on my phone for like hours, probably 6-7 hours a day. I would close my office door, put my head down. I literally was stripped naked and didn't realize that that's how I was going to react to it. At the time, I was about 14 months from retirement, so I had planned to write a book on leadership. Well, that quickly went to the side, and because I was, again, stripped naked emotionally, I know I needed to climb out of that, and I needed to do it properly. And so I had a suicidal ideation, and I'm driving down the street, going to work, and I said, my dad died before I was born, my mom died, I'm an orphan, why am I living? And I said, oh my gosh, where did that come from? Everybody depends on my strength, and now I don't feel very strong. I'm a father, a grandfather, a leader, a husband, and I knew I had to do something. So I started on this journey to wellness, and that journey took me to learning about the 5 steps to emotional wellness, my journey, and that's what I wrote the books about. It is the 5 steps. When you think about a 13-year-old boy who saw his father strike his mother, we call that trauma. You talk about a 13-year-old girl who was touched inappropriately by her uncle, we call that trauma. If neither one of them deal with that trauma, what kind of decisions do you think they're going to be making in their 20s and 30s? You know, probably dealing with some sadness, some anger, some anxiety, some depression. Maybe they're in and out of relationships. Maybe they're in and out of careers. But all of a sudden at the age of 45, when they walk into a room, everybody goes, oh my gosh, you look great, you look wonderful, what did you do? It took them 32 years to stumble across these 5 steps to emotional wellness. What if I thought, if I wrote these books that speaks to the 13-year-old in all of us, and all the things that we go through in childhood, like divorce, loss, rejection, and trauma. What if we address those, and then I teach them those youth the 5 steps to emotional wellness, and they embrace all 5 steps by the age of 14? Now, how different will their decision making be?
So, Rod, let me ask you, why did you pick age 13? Like, what was the significance of age 13?
Very, very good question. So what I learned, and I'll use an absent father for an example. When a little boy, when a 10-year-old boy's father is absent from his life, mm-hmm. he's sad. When he turns 13, he's mad.
Okay.
And so when he gets mad, he's going to do a few things, one of a few things, right? He's either going to shut the world out, mm-hmm. go play video games all day, shut his door. I don't know what's wrong with my son. Mm-hmm. He won't come out. He only wants to play video games. He's not active. Mm-hmm. Or he acts out. Maybe he's out punching people. Maybe he's out stealing cars. Maybe he's smoking, drinking, and doing all those things that those vices that he's picking up to comfort his pain. Maybe he's even having sex at that age. Gotcha. And so these are the things that happens very easily, and it normally starts around that 12, 13 age. And so that's where I focus at, because kids start getting mad around that time.
And I know for me, when I think of, Tammy, I don't know what your thoughts are. When I think of 13-year-olds, as a grandparent as well, what is happening in our children's ages at age 13? I think is that they're freshmen in high school. They're on that last 4 years of what I sometimes consider the most important 4 years, because those last 4 years of, what I call, life, or child life before you become an adult, because I said to my children, high school is non-negotiable. You are going to get a high school diploma. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you decide to go to college, that's, I'll let you decide that, but high school is not negotiable. And whether or not you're going to go to college, or whether or not you're going to go to, or you choose to go to a job, those last 4 years of school are the most important. So I sat back and I was looking, I was like, 13, Rod, you're on to something here, that is a very interesting age, because I agree with you. It's like this, we're not kids anymore. We end up, or they're not, I'm just upset and I'm going to go, pout. I'm angry. I love that.
Listen to me. I'm angry. I have a mind of my own. These are the things you start to hear at that age.
And 13 is that first, the teenage years is when the teenage years start.
Yeah, and and I hadn't thought about this in such a long time, but listening to you guys talk and this age 13, I had, and you wouldn't think that it was really a traumatic event per se at the age of 13, but in a way it kind of was. For my 13th birthday, we had this real expensive steakhouse in town that we only went for like super special occasions. So for my 13th birthday, my parents promised me that that's where I was going to go for my birthday dinner. So had, friends over, had sleepover, and, all that stuff went well. Came time for us to go out to dinner. My dad refused to go. He absolutely refused to go. And so my mom and I went by ourselves out to dinner for my 13th birthday without my dad.
How many years ago was that? And you still remember
I'm
it?
going to be 60 in August.
Wow. Wow.
And
So-
that is something that, it's weird. I mean, it's not something that you think about,
Right.
Very often at all. But listening to this and, what you're saying about that age and, things that happen, I was like, that was something that has always stuck with me, was that moment in time when I was 13. I turned 13.
The word you use always stuck with you. So what I like to say is that our brains are constantly looking for closure. Why would you hurt me? Why would you cheat on me? Why would you lie on me? Why would you fire me? Why would you tell me I'm not going to be anything? Why would you not attend my events, my school events, right? Mm-hmm. So those things are like open doors in our brains. And so we may have 20 or 30 open doors in our brain that we never got closure on. And it comes up and rears its ugly head every now and again. And the only way to close those doors is to forgive it all. All of those people that's ever hurt you in your entire life, you have to forgive it. So now the doors just start closing. Doors in your brain just start closing. And now you don't have to worry about referring back to that because you've forgiven it. You've thought about the strength that you have obtained from it. And you go, well, you know what? I'm better for it because I've never missed my child's birthdays. And, I make a big deal out of theirs. And so that's what I learned from it. And I survived it.
I'm looking at your analogy in terms of dealing with things in that word closure, because that, closure has come up with us as we process through, the grief stages. We talk about, it's not linear, it's not circular, it isn't, you go out of stage one, you're in stage two, you'll never go back to stage one, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm listening to your analogy about closing doors. How do you reconcile, or what would you say to a person, I'll use myself, and Tammy as examples, who we've lost loved ones to suicide. We've lost, I've additionally, lost Patrick to substance misuse, which we question whether or not it was a substance misuse masked by, a suicide. That word closure, for a lot of us, becomes a stickler point. Even for me as a mental health professional, I find myself walking a bit of a line in some instances as it relates to closure. And when I hear you say, okay, if this door closes, it's not something we have to deal with anymore. If I'm understanding, what if I heard, if I'm interpreting what you said. How do you close a door completely, or can you ever close a door completely on trauma or grief? And if not, how do you deal with that?
So when you say close and not refer to it anymore, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're removing the emotion from it.
Okay.
Right? So you're still, we're always told, you can forgive, but you can't forget. Well, by forgiving and removing the emotion from it, remembering it does not trigger the sadness, the anger, the anxiety that comes with that memory. So that's the key, is to forgive it. Because sometimes we haven't forgiven our loved ones who passed away or who may have died by suicide. We haven't forgiven them yet. And so going back to forgiveness and closing the door, and then how do you celebrate them? Right? You know, you did the balloon thing, right? You know, to celebrate his life. Not mourn his death. So we're not talking about, you're talking about the day he was born and not the date that he died. So that's what you celebrated. So it's so key to celebrate them. And another thing you can do is create a scholarship in his name, a memorial scholarship. And then invite his siblings and the grandchildren. Everyone comes out to give out that $500 scholarship every year, right? Create a nice certificate, put it in a frame so that now your son's name hangs on somebody's wall in college.
Kind of like what Tammy did in creating, you know, the foundation in Bobby's name.
Purpose.
You know.
Yes, you created purpose behind it, so it helps. So now the memory is all about all of the wonderful things that have come since the passing.
And, you know, you talk about, you know, removing the emotion from it. And I think what we find for some people, that is when it becomes, in some cases, the biggest stumbling block. How do I erase the emotion? Erase. You know, right. But, you know, and now when we hear this, you know, how do I erase the emotion? Because what I find, you know, sometimes, and, you know, you can speak to this, where, you know, we look at people and say, okay, let's talk about, you know, emotional regulation. You know, and the mindset becomes, well, you want me to erase the fact that I'm feeling like this. You want me to erase, and that's not possible.
Well, that's a very strong word you use when you say erase.
Okay.
Because that's somehow saying, that's a resistance word. I am not going to erase my child or my husband or my father or what have you. I'm not going. We're not saying erase, we're saying celebrate their life. That's all we're doing, we're celebrating. And so as we celebrate, we have these great memories, right? Now, there's going to be times where, I like to think of mindset. People talk about mindset. Mindset is like a string on your forehead connected to whatever you're thinking about. So if my mindset is connected to my loved ones passing away, then all I have to do is move the string. Right? Just move the string. And so how do we move the string effectively? That's where self-care comes in. You move the string because you went for a run. You move the string because you got down and did some push-ups. You move the string because you went out in the garden and started gardening. You move the string because you jumped in the pool and went for a swim. You move the string because you turned on your favorite show. Maybe it's a pastor that you love to listen to, a motivational speaker. You move the string by simply focusing in on your self-care. Nice. Putting on the music or what have you.
Is it kind of like, I mean, the emotion is still kind of there, but you're just changing the emotion?
Because really all it is right, you got a thought, and then an emotion came from that thought, right? So now we're going to change the thought. We're not disacknowledging our loved one.
Right.
Sometimes we feel like if we forgive, we let a person off the hook. We feel like if we move the string, then all of a sudden we're not honoring the person, that we should cry ourselves to sleep in honor of that person. But when you're crying yourself to sleep, and when your son knocks on the door and says, "Hey, Mom, you got a minute?" "No, honey." "Okay, Mom. I guess I'll go and find something else. Maybe the girl across the street, Susie, maybe she'll keep me company. Maybe she'll listen to me. But that Susie's a bad little girl. But she loves me, Mommy, and she gives me attention, and you're still crying all the time, and I don't know how to connect with you, so I'm going to go find someone who I can connect to." Maybe it's a little girl, maybe it's a gang member, maybe it's, a certain community that embraces me. So that's where I'm going to go, because Mommy's always sad. Mommy is still living, and Mommy has other people who also wants Mommy's attention. And if Mommy's always in a sad place, she's not living, and it's affecting everyone.
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
and that's the thing too. She's not living. And we've talked about this several times. It is the living part of it. You know, I've found myself, and I think we touched on it on a recent show. There's several times that, and now, people were starting to go out and do things, and so some of our business networking groups are starting to get together, and I don't feel like going out and being around people, and especially after, we haven't had to for a year and a half,
Right.
so, but I force myself to go, and I kind of like force myself to be happy. Because I'm like, I'm going to this group of people. They're not sad, I'm going to go in and I'm going to be happy along with them. And then it just kind of naturally happens, and then you find out that you feel it actually, that you're happy, and you're with this group of people that are happy, and you're enjoying yourself. You're living.
Yes, yes. Now I want you to imagine what you just talked about and the fact that young people use school and sports to be able to release some of that pain that they may be dealing with, that
Right.
emotional pain, and then everything shut down.
Exactly.
And now they can't go. They can't act silly and goofy in class or look at their crush that they, nobody knows that they have it, but it makes them happy to see her or him, right?
Right.
And just having that fun and laughing and being silly, and they couldn't for the past year and a half, right? How is their emotional health? How are they dealing with their emotional wellness as far as the middle and high schoolers?
And it's, even though that they're going to be either they have already been able to go back to school or will be able to go back to school, that stress and trauma that has happened over the last year and a half is going to be with them.
And it can't be ignored.
No, it can't. We've lost teens to suicide during this time because people didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something that's going to continue unless, like you said, you can't ignore it. These kids, and especially at that age, it is going to affect them, and it needs to be dealt with.
I was taking a mental health first aid course probably about 4 years ago, and the instructor talked about how her son at 16 died by suicide. And she just could never understand. It took her a long time to understand why he did it. And so I'm sitting in the audience because this is what I do. This is the business that I'm in. And I'm sitting there going, I wonder if she got a divorce. I wonder what's going on. I wonder what her son saw between his mother and his father. I wonder if that had a lot to do with it. Then my mind went to trauma, if there were no trauma and loss, if there were no issues with the parents. And so as she continues to tell the story, she said she had gotten a divorce, and her husband was estranged, and her husband was not coming around very much for the son, and the son saw fit to make the choice that he made. And so I think we should know what those things are. What are the red flags? And so I talk about 4 of those in the book. I always say the 4 things that will break any person's heart. I don't care who you are, it will break your heart. And so those are the 4 things. So if you just keep piling on one of these 4 things, it becomes a one more thing. How many of us have said, I can't take another thing? I can't take one. Boy, can you understand what has gone on with me in the last 3 years? If one more thing happens, I don't know if I can take it. Dying by suicide is not a one incident. It is a one more thing.
Yep,
it's just stuff
exactly.
that piles and piles and piles on without any relief. My friend Gary White from Gary White Training, he talks about a bucket. And he says, as things happen, your parents divorce, your bucket gets filled up. about a quarter of the way. And then all of a sudden grandma passes and your bucket gets more filled, and and your friend gets killed in a car accident and it fills some more. And then you're rejected, in a relationship, and now it's overflowing. And as you talk to people, as you go through life, you're bumping into them and spilling all of your stuff onto people because you have not created a spigot to relieve some of that. And so that's what the book talks about. It gives you the things that's going to release some of that water so that you're prepared for life's next event.
This is what happens when you're sitting in a training session with Rod. It's like he like, it's mesmerizing. I don't remember. I'm sitting here like, Rod, I've heard you speak before, and every time I listen to you speak, it's like, this man, what else does he have to come out of his pocket with? But you talk about when we are relating to trauma, for example, and you speak very eloquently on that. That people don't, like most people, when they think of trauma, they think of something like over the top, a death, that's a trauma. A car crash, that's a trauma. Somebody put their hands on someone else, that's a trauma. But I like the way you touch on other things that, for some people, they would not necessarily characterize them as trauma, but they are. Like this thing you talked about, rejection, which, most, some of the people that I deal with, in my, not the, off show, or out of studio things, where we're talking about what are things that are impacting, emotional wellness, that rejection piece, is a lot of it. How do you address that piece of, it's traumatic. We see, we may see it as trauma, but someone else doesn't see it as trauma. How do you address rejection?
So when a person, nobody likes to be rejected, right? And so when I speak about rejection, I'm talking about being bullied by your siblings, by your friends at school or your peers. I'm talking about your very first breakup. Because when we decide at 15, 16, 17 and get into a relationship, we give it our whole heart. And so that's the first time we gave it our whole heart, and our minds and our dreams go with that heart. And so now we're thinking about, what our life's going to be like in our 20s and 30s. We want to have kids. We want to get married, have kids with this person, and do all of those things. And all of a sudden you break up, now that person's going out with your best friend. I'm sorry, I triggered a lot of you.
Most definitely.
I didn't date in high school, so
I'm sure I've triggered a lot of people, right? Even myself, right? And so we remember our the first person we went out with more than we do the third person we went out with. We could probably remember their phone number, with their mom, their address, their mom, dad, sister, brother, cousins, all their names. We probably remember all of that. And we're, in our 40s and 50s and can remember that because that was a special moment or a special bond that was broken. And that kind of drives our decision making. That first heartbreak drives our decision making with love, in the future. So rejection is huge. Also, rejection is also systemic racism, right? So if I'm being rejected or looked down upon because of the color of my skin, which I can't do anything about, I need counseling for that, right? I need to talk to somebody because that's just another thing that's pushing me down, right? So let's say that I have, the four things. Let's go over the four things real quick. The four things are parental abandonment. So that's if your mom and dad, they break up or they were never married or they don't tell you that they love you and that they care about you. That's what we call parental abandonment. It's the first heartbreak we have. Number two is loss. Grandma, best friend. And if I had to rate the loss of the heartbreak from loss, I would say the loss of a child is traumatic. It is, I mean, whether that child passed away last year or 40 years ago, it is huge, and nobody really understands the pain that a parent goes through when they lose a child, and how it changes their outlook on life, and how they change how they communicate with other people, because they don't feel like anyone will understand. So it's the loss of a child, then a spouse, then a parent, and grandparent, and then a best friend or sibling. Those normally kind of go hand in hand with the amount of pain that one experiences from losing them. And we're not really taught how to grieve, and I'm sure this show's probably helped a lot of you do that, but we're not really taught how to do that. Number 3 is trauma, and like she mentioned, trauma is from seeing a dead body, from a car accident, from inappropriate touching, also from watching someone abuse your mother, right, or father. If the police comes in and throws your brother against the wall, that's trauma, because you don't want anyone you love hurt. And then the last one is rejection. And so all 4 of those things require action. We must do something, because all 4 of those things is filling up our bucket. And so we have to put a spigot in and get some relief from that. And that's what the 5 steps to emotional wellness will do. And we did talk about one, which is forgiveness.
So, Rod, you talk about, I mean, that loss of a child, you got me there. Just,
I'm sorry.
it's like, no, you do not need to apologize. It's like, woo.
But you feel like no one understands you.
That is true. But, you know, Rod, I got to give you some props here. And
Okay.
I think you may remember the incident. We were at an event together, and we was talking about, loss of children and whatnot. And somebody had said something, and they were, can we get, I think they were asking for a photo op or something like that. And
For anyone that's lost a child.
yes,
to come
okay,
up-
you
come
know
up to the
you know what I'm
stage.
talking
Yes.
about. And I was sitting back, and Rod just very, I'm trying to think of the adjective that I want to use, because it wasn't like an in-your-face kind of thing, but he very gently said to, somebody up front, what about her? She's lost a child and a grandchild. And I sat back, and I'm like, like we already had a working relationship. And I was like, thank you, Rod. In my head, I'm thinking, thank you, Rod. Because in that moment, to your point, somebody gets it. Somebody actually gets it. Because we've been talking about, this whole loss, and the issue of loss and whatnot. And I was like, wow, to kind of set my feet on this, journey now. Like, what do I do with, processing that loss? I often hide behind the fact that I'm a mental health professional. I should know how to deal with this. I'm a mental health professional. I should not be feeling this. And, and you go, what would the book say? What was I trained to do? And it's like, I shared,
I would say move the string.
Exactly. And I remember when I was talking to Kira, Aiden's, my daughter-in-law, Aiden's mom, what I said to her after Aiden died, because with the family, it's like, let's talk to, whether it's Bonni and mom, Nana, or whoever. That's the therapist in the family. Let's go talk to her. And I'm like, no, guys, Nana's not going to be the family therapist. But anyway, I remember, talking to her after we lost Aiden, and that role reversal that we did after I lost Pat, and she became my role. And I remember saying to her, you remember some of that stuff I said to you? That was the stupidest stuff that ever came out of my mouth. I get it now, because it does put things in a different perspective. But that being said, when we're talking, when you're talking about finding a way to put a spigot on your bucket and release things, if you can talk a little bit about what are some things that people can do, and especially if you can, not to make this racial, however, we are, cresting into July being Minority Mental Health Month, and, this Saturday is Juneteenth. But I think specifically the Black community, in terms of, access to care or stigma as it relates to, accessing care or even asking for help. And, not to make it, it's not just a black thing, a
Right.
black thing. However, at times it feels like, depending upon the demographic, there is a different viewpoint in terms of, where do I go for help and how comfortable am I reaching out?
What I would say is, culturally speaking, African Americans, and I have to go all the way back to slavery time frame. So just imagine that we all are back in the 1820s, 1830s, and we're seeing human beings being beaten, whipped, killed, raped, and things of that nature. So imagine, as a human being, you're watching your daughter get raped, right? Or your two daughters get raped, or your sisters, and you can do absolutely nothing about it without being killed. And then you go and you want to do something about it to avenge that type of trauma. And your mother says, son, where are you going? No, I got to do something, Mom. Son, stop. I can't lose you too. I need you to shut your mouth and sit down. But Mama, shh. What goes on in this house stays in this house. And so to go from 1830 to 1860, shh, 1890, shh, 1920, shh, 1950, 1980, 2010, 2021, shh. What goes on in this house stays in this house. So there's nothing wrong. We'll get through it. We're going to be just fine. So that's the biggest thing, because we are told to deal with it in the home by our grandmothers and our mothers, to stop talking about what's going on in the household. That's the number one reason why culturally we don't go and get the help that we need. The second thing is my skin color. You've already told me, society has told me that I'm different, that I'm less than, through systemic racism. So now you're going to tell me that I need some help, that I need to talk to somebody? No, I'm not going to receive that. You're not going to talk down to me again and tell me that I need help. And so those are the two biggest reasons culturally why we don't seek mental health counseling or therapy. And so when I talk about the 5 steps to emotional wellness, therapy is one of those steps. I got therapy. I went to the mental health clinic when I was active duty Air Force. It was weird at first because I was a chief master sergeant. There was only 20 of us on the base, and there were 13,000 troops. So when I walk into the mental health clinic, there's troops sitting in the clinic. And what do? I go into chief mode. Hey, how you doing, Sarge? Hey, good to see you. Hey, man, you know, doing all right? Hey. Mm-hmm. And then I go to the desk and sign in and sit down. And they're like, Chief is here too. Yes, Chief is here too. And so it was odd the first time, but after that, I just came in and did my thing, shook hands every time I went for my visit. But it was very, very helpful. It wasn't a whole solution. It was the 20% solution. But counseling works. It's very, very helpful to get out of our head, because we get in our heads too much. And so they help you, the therapist helps you to figure out, how to move with those thoughts and get better thoughts, because really it's all about, what we're thinking at the time that we're thinking and how we react to that. And so I found that to be very helpful. So counseling, I mentioned counseling just now, therapy, and then I mentioned forgiveness. And number 3 would be spirituality. Now, when I talk about spirituality, I'm not talking about religion. Religion, has to do with rules. Come to church every Sunday, come back every Wednesday, read your Bible. I mean, those are the rules and rituals, right, of religion. But spirituality is a one-way relationship between you and God. What we do many times is we connect our spirit to other people, our parents, our boyfriend or girlfriend, our spouse, our children, our pastor. And then if the pastor cheats on his wife, what do? Oh, they're hypocrites. I'm never going back over there. But the pastor has his own relationship with God. He has to deal with it. You have yours. So you let him, don't judge him. You let him deal with what he has to deal with God, and you deal with what you have to deal with. So that's what I talk about spirituality. Also, it's like having a devil on this shoulder and an angel on this shoulder, and whichever one you feed the most is what will come out of you when you get quiet. Because when things happen, high stress comes, we get quiet. And what our next step is based on what has gone inside of us. So if we're listening to explicit music, and explicit music says punch him in the face. And so when you get quiet, you're like, oh, I know what I need to do. I need to punch him in the face. But if you're listening to gospel music or uplifting music, and you're reading the Bible and you're reading positive stuff, then that's what goes into the angel. Now that's what comes out of you when you get quiet. So we have to have that one-way relationship with God, and we have to continue to feed the angel that's sitting on our shoulders. The other one is purpose. Purpose has nothing to do with you and everything to do with why is someone else's life better because you lived outside of your family. How are you helping other people going into the school districts? There's a lot of kids who can't read. Go to elementary school and tutor those young people who can't read. That's purpose. Go to some of our elderly facilities and do activities with the elderly. Feed the homeless. That's purpose. Now other people are depending on you to come and help them, and that warms your heart when you're able to help others. And then the last one, number 5, will be journaling and art. A lot of us journal, but some people will tell me, I can't journal. I can't put those things on paper because my mother always said they never have a paper trail for the stuff that you're going through. So she refused, even though I've done the research. All the stuff that I talk about has been researched. It is evidence. I use evidence-based practices for my books and so on and so forth. But she still, I know, Rod, I can't write it down. I said, it's going to be so helpful. I says, no, I'll just keep going to my therapist and keep my appointments. I'll be fine. But, and that, again, that's a 20% solution. So we do want people to still journal. And journaling might be writing that book. So I encourage you to write your story. But when you write your story, I want you to finish your story 10 years from today with a wonderful, happy ending, with nothing missing and nothing broken. And so you get to project the life you want to live 10 years from now, and then but start your story from when you were first hurt. Maybe it was 7, maybe it was 8. Start your story at 8 years old and end it 10 years from today, but make sure it's a happy ending, and then just roll back to the day and start to moving your life, moving the string in the direction of how you want your life to go.
Bud, I tell you, you bringing down the house. There are those of us, when you talk about spirituality and a relationship with God. I mean, there are those of us, we talk about, I have a relationship with God. Other people, it's like whatever your higher power is. But I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, as a young girl, sitting in the pews at my grandfather's church when the pastor's up in the pulpit and he's bringing down a message, and you'd be like, preach, and I'm sitting here, my head is going, preach, But one thing I want to just rewind for half a second. When you were talking about being the chief that goes into the mental health facility for help, and you're like, and I think what I heard you say is, I go into chief mode. Because one of the other things that we deal with in talking about whether it's substance misuse, mental health, suicide, and Tammy and I, oftentimes as we're doing an intro, before we get into our discussion, we talk about this is a difficult conversation for some people to have. But I'm hearing you say, okay, so Chief walks into this mental health facility, Chief goes into chief mode, and a part of me was like, well, how much of that has to do with stigma? Because I sit back and I think about, of course I'm, on the Army side of the house, we joke and say the Army's the bitter branch. No, seriously. But, when we're in these leadership roles and we go in and we're seeking help for ourselves, and we're looking, it's like, here's these junior NCOs or these junior, airmen or soldiers or, Marines or whatever, and they see, Sarge, Chief walk in. Was there ever a time where, I sit back and I was like, how many of these individuals would think for a moment that I'm in here for me. How many of these individuals that are sitting here think that I'm in here because I'm supporting one of my troops? Or I'm in here because it has something to do with one of my troops and not me. The same way after, Patrick's death, when I'm doing, my presentations on, substance misuse and whatnot, I started off with an interview that I did. And I don't, tell them, well, you're going to see the interview with me. You're going to see a short, 3-4 minute clip, and we'll talk about it afterwards. And then I kind of sit back and I play the clip, and it's interesting to watch the faces, like the vibe in the room changes. And after it's over, I was like, what did you notice about that? And I hear, that was you. And I was like, precisely. So how did you as chief, well, let me ask you, I don't want to presume, but did you feel stigmatized as, I'm chief, I'm supposed to be like the person who has all my ducks in a row. I'm not supposed to have issues. What are my airmen now going to think of chief being here for help?
One of the things that I found, if you want a person to go to counseling, you want a person to get help, you have to be transparent. And so I have no problem being transparent. I would tell my wife, oh, you tell too much. I will tell it all because I'm hoping that someone could learn from it, right? And so I don't mind saying that I've had therapy in the past 5-6 months through the VA. And so I was doing a checkup, my annual checkup, and they go, hey, would you like to have some therapy? I said, sure, free therapy, I'll take it. And so we did about 8 sessions. I even brought my wife into the sessions with me. And what we learned during those sessions, especially during the pandemic, was by me working from home, my wife would interrupt me with all of these stories with everybody's life, her cousin, her sister, and so on. And she would come sit in my chair, and I'm thinking, I have work to do. And so what the therapist helped us do was for me to create time for her from 5 to 6:30, where I'd turn off all devices, keep in my office, go out into the den area, and then we spend time together from 5 to 6:30. And then she can tell me all the bad news or all the news, right? Because I try to work from a what I call a frequency that's here. And so if she comes with bad news, it drops my frequency. At this frequency, I don't make phone calls for my business. I don't feel like making phone calls. I don't feel like sending that extra email. I don't feel like doing that extra research. But when my frequency is here, I'm making things happen. So do not come in at 2 or 3 o'clock or even 10 in the morning and bring my frequency down because I don't get the work done. I need my frequency to stay up and tell me all about it at 5 p.m.
I like that.
Yeah.
And this is a topic that we'll get into in, another segment where we're talking about veterans and, our access to care. Because, unfortunately, there are some demographics that, the access is not there either because there's just not enough of us in the field to provide the care to everyone who needs it. There is, that stigma. And I love your I'm transparent because I'm the same way. I have no problem acknowledging. I, like you, I've been to therapy. I, like you, I remember during the interview, Evan, the guy who did the interview, asked me a question, and he, was, I don't want to say careful. Evan is skillful. I don't know if if you know Evan Exelbank from Fox. Okay, anyway, amazing journalist. He's masterful at what he does. And as he was asking me the question, he, made it a point to tell me, I want to ask you a question, but I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm asking you. And the question was, you're a mental health professional. How did this happen to you? And he's talking about losing, we were focused on Patrick, it was during the, the narcotics overdose prevention and education event. And I looked at him, and when I tell people he asked me that question, he feels like that was so rude. I was like, no, you don't understand. It doesn't discriminate. And so I tell people, you're right. I am someone in the field. But I deal, it doesn't discriminate. So, Rod, in our last minute or so, if you could, can you talk to people about, tell people about your book? Is it available for the lay person to have? And if so, how do they get it?
Yes, so thank you for that. So the books are called Climb and Climb 2. You can go to www.choose, CHOOSE, climb, CLIMB.com. And so the book sets, it's designed for the 13-year-old and all of us, but Climb 2 is really designed to help young people soar. So if you have a young person in your life, a child, a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, a neighbor, and you really want to know how to mentor them and give them good advice about where their life is headed, whether it's their career, having good character, all of those things are covered in here. If they want, even if they're thinking about going into the military, should they go to college, should they go to technical school, all of that is in Climb 2. Climb 1 really covers the 5 steps to emotional wellness, but Climb 2 is the next steps.
Oh, great. Wow, guys.
This has been quite an hour. Rod, we really want to thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
And we may end up having to have you back again sometime, I hope.
Sounds good.
We do
So-
a part 2, yes.
Yeah. So remember, if someone's in crisis, call 911. But remember, there's always
always
hope.
hope.
Thank you.